Stephen A. Smith has just unleashed on Shedeur Sanders. If you've been keeping up, Shedur's journey in the league hasn't exactly been smooth sailing. And now, reports say he's sealing a contract outside the NFL. Let's just say Stephen A. isn't thrilled about it.
It is a crime. It is a disgrace.
But that's only the beginning. He's also dropping heavy truths about what's really been happening around Sanders. Here's the breakdown. The live clash that rattled the NFL. Stephen A. Smith never holds his tongue. But what went down on Instagram Live left viewers stunned. In real time, millions tuned in as Stephen A. confronted Shedeur Sanders, the son of Hall of Famer Deion "Primetime" Sanders, over his controversial new deal outside the NFL. Shedeur isn't just another young quarterback pursuing the dream. He carries the weight of being the child of one of the most polarizing icons in football history. For Stephen A., who has built decades of credibility by exposing hypocrisy and cutting through the excuses of athletes, owners, and coaches, Shedeur sidestepping the NFL to ink an outside contract was enough to light a firestorm. Shedeur Sanders entered the league under pressure greater than most rookies could even imagine. Scouts once tagged him as first-round potential, and analysts believed he could become the cornerstone of a franchise. Instead, he slid to the later draft rounds, leaving fans and insiders in disbelief. Stephen A. himself once said,
The fact that this brother hasn't been picked in the first 3 rounds, that is a crime. It is a disgrace.
Those words weren't just commentary. They were a warning, a preview, because what followed looked less like a football decision and more like what Stephen A. labeled collusion among NFL owners to keep Shedeur from prospering under their system. All thanks to his father, Deion Sanders. When Shedeur opted to sign his new deal outside the NFL's framework, it was like tossing fuel on an already burning blaze. Critics branded it reckless. Insiders murmured that it was career suicide. But to Shedeur, this was about control, about reclaiming his future from NFL executives who had already proven they weren't willing to let him thrive on his own terms. Stephen A. Smith wasn't about to let that go unchecked. Not on his watch. Once he went live with Shedeur, the exchange turned heated. We're talking about a commentator who has made a career out of blunt honesty, facing a young quarterback sick of being treated like a pawn by the league's power brokers. At one point, Stephen A. stared straight into the camera and told Shedeur,
Understood. We don't want him because we don't like his daddy. Or we don't like his...
Do you realize how heavy that statement is? This wasn't only about Shedeur. It was about his family name, his heritage, the fact that his father has spent years defying the establishment. And now Shedeur is the one taking the consequences. This is bigger than football. This was about power, control, and whether a young black quarterback with skill, composure, and pedigree would ever truly be allowed to escape the system that has devoured so many before him. That's why Stephen A. came down on him so fiercely during IG Live. In his eyes, Shedeur wasn't simply making a career move. He was challenging the very core of the NFL. While Stephen A. has consistently called out league owners for their double standards, this night he aimed that same fire directly at Shedeur. It almost felt like he was warning him. If you plan to take on the machine, then you better be ready for what follows. Think about it. This is the same league that blackballed Colin Kaepernick for kneeling during the anthem. The same league that, as Stephen A. himself highlighted, paid every owner a $246 million check while still blaming Kaepernick for costing them money. The message couldn't be clearer. The NFL doesn't forgive, and it certainly doesn't forget. But Shedeur refused to fold. He fought back, standing by his decision, making it clear he wasn't letting his destiny be dictated by men who had already shown they had no faith in him. And the tone of his words carried frustration, the very same frustration his father has carried for years.
Was in, gonna pull him up out of there. Stuff like that. On the NFL level, can't do.
Meanwhile, fans in the comments went wild. Some blasted Stephen A. as a hypocrite. Others accused Shedeur of destroying his career. And then there were a few who dared to voice what many were quietly thinking, that maybe this was exactly what the NFL feared most. Because if Shedeur Sanders thrived outside their system, it would rip open a truth they've desperately tried to bury, that their chokehold on football talent isn't as unbreakable as they want the world to believe. This IG Live wasn't just a debate. It became a symbol of generational warfare. The old guard insisting athletes play by the billionaires' rules versus a rising wave ready to risk it all for independence. The fallout and the bigger picture. The live session was supposed to be quick and casual, or at least that's what fans thought when they got the notification. Stephen A. Smith is live with Shedeur Sanders. But instead of harmless banter, what unfolded was a career-defining clash, live and unfiltered. The backlash was instant, viral, and chaotic. Within minutes, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube were flooded with reposts, breakdowns, and reactions. Hashtags like hashtag Shedeur Sanders, hashtag Stephen A., and hashtag exposed trended overnight. But it wasn't just the exchange, it was the timing. Shedeur had just locked in a multi-million-dollar deal beyond NFL structures, rumored to include endorsements, media partnerships, and ventures stretching far past football. It was a type of deal no fifth-round rookie had ever been handed before.
Injuries or off-the-field issues force you to plummet, none of which applies to Shedeur Sanders.
And that's what unsettled NFL owners. Because what happens if Shedeur Sanders proves he doesn't need the NFL to dominate? What happens if others follow his path? Suddenly, the league's stranglehold on young stars starts to weaken. Viewers expected Stephen A. to run the conversation. He's a polished veteran broadcaster, after all. But Shedeur, calm yet defiant, didn't flinch. He reminded everyone he had lived his entire life under a spotlight. From shining at Jackson State to putting Colorado back into national headlines with his father as coach, pressure was nothing new. And when Stephen A. pressed him on walking away from the NFL system, Shedeur fired back. If the NFL didn't want me, then why should I hand them control over me? They had their chance. I'm not begging for space at their table. I'm building my own. The comments exploded. Supporters dropped fire emojis and cheered with lines like, "Say it louder," while critics slammed the chat with warnings like, "This is career suicide." Nobody wins against the NFL. By sunrise, every major sports outlet across the country was running the story. Skip Bayless called it the boldest move ever pulled off by a rookie quarterback. Shannon Sharpe likened it to what Colin Kaepernick endured when his activism collided with ownership's power. ESPN ran the IG Live segment nearly every hour, but the most chilling responses came from league insiders. Anonymous NFL executives allegedly told reporters that Shedeur had torched his bridges and would never see meaningful snaps in the league again. It echoed the draft saga. Remember, Shedeur wasn't just ignored, he was embarrassed, sliding into the later round despite being ranked as a top 20 prospect by Mel Kiper Jr. Stephen A. had predicted back then the draft snub wasn't about ability.
Where they made a huge mistake is that everyone is going to think collusion.
Right.
Because you can't say there's 5 quarterbacks in the draft that were better than Shedeur Sanders.
It was politics. And by calling out Shedeur so openly now, he dragged the NFL's dirty secrets back into the spotlight. This wasn't only about Shedeur. It was about his father, Deion Sanders, larger than life. Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champion, television star, and now the college coach who turned Colorado into a media frenzy. Owners resented the attention he commanded. Interview 707-716. On IG Live, Stephen A. connected the dots, saying out loud what executives had whispered for months, that Shedeur was being penalized simply for who his father is. Let that sink in. The NFL, a league that boasts about being a meritocracy, accused of blackballing a young QB not because of his skill, but because of his last name. That's bigger than sports. That's systemic. That's the type of accusation that shakes fans' faith in the entire institution. NFL franchises have bent over backward for players with DUIs, assault cases, and countless off-field scandals. Yet Shedeur Sanders, with zero legal baggage, no locker room chaos, and nothing but production on the field, was painted as a problem. Why? Because his father had the audacity to want some influence in his son's career trajectory. Interview 758, 812. And that's pure hypocrisy. Teams can overlook DUIs and public meltdowns, but a father guiding his son? Suddenly, that's unacceptable. As the IG Live clip spread, fans were sharply divided.
What we saw, Shedeur Sanders looked very bad. Very bad.
Team Shedeur argued he was forging a new path, breaking free from a system designed to keep players controlled. They compared him to trailblazers in music and business who refused to bow to industry norms. Team Stephen A. fired back, saying Shedeur was throwing away prestige, legacy, and the lifelong honor of being in the NFL for fast money and fleeting attention. But the most telling reaction came in the form of silence. The NFL made no statements, issued no press releases, and didn't attempt to spin the story. That silence screamed louder than any official response could. It was as if the league knew that even acknowledging Shedeur's contract or Stephen A's fiery criticism would only legitimize the storm. But silence doesn't erase perception. And the perception that began to grow among fans was simple. The NFL was afraid. Interview 906-912. By the week's end, Shedeur Sanders had gone from an overlooked rookie to one of the most talked about figures in all of sports. He achieved what few would dare imagine, forcing the most powerful sports league in America into the background of conversation it couldn't control. While Stephen A. believed he was simply holding Shedeur accountable.
So you mentioned the fact that why would they sabotage an NFL Legends player? I think that's part of it too.
In reality, he exposed the cracks in the NFL's foundation, the hate machine, and what it really stands for. If you think the IG Live clash was a conclusion, think again. What followed was even more revealing. The coordinated wave of hate that trailed Shedeur Sanders everywhere he went. And when you peel back the layers of why so many pile on Shedeur, the pattern goes much deeper than football itself. Let's break down why Shedeur Sanders faces more hate than nearly any other young quarterback in recent memory. First up, the silver spoon narrative. One of the most common accusations is that Shedeur had it all handed to him.
Sad part about what we saw this weekend. That may be the only time we see Shedeur Sanders on the NFL field this year.
From his first snap, critics pointed to his father, Deion Sanders, claiming Shedeur never had to grind the way other players did. They argued every opportunity, from Jackson State to Colorado, was arranged by primetime himself. But here's the hypocrisy. NFL teams regularly draft quarterbacks from football dynasties. The Manning brothers, Patrick Mahomes' father being a pro athlete, even the Boza family, all celebrated for their lineage. So why is Shedeur dismissed as a Nepo baby, while others are praised for coming from NFL bloodlines? The answer is uncomfortable, because his last name is Sanders, and because Deion has never followed the NFL's unwritten code of silence and obedience. Then came the draft day humiliation. The NFL draft was a national spectacle, and Shedeur Sanders became its centerpiece, though for all the wrong reasons. Analysts projected him as a first-rounder, even pegging him as a top 20 prospect. Yet he wasn't selected until the later rounds. That's not just a drop, that's a free fall. Fans unaware of the politics behind the scenes assumed the obvious. Maybe he wasn't that good. So right from the start, his pro career began with him fighting against the perception that he was overrated. And when he turned in one poor preseason outing, 3 completions, 5 sacks, and just 14 yards, critics pounced shouting, "See? We told you." Let's be honest. People despise it when athletes secure big paydays before proving themselves. Shedeur's groundbreaking contract outside the NFL was reportedly worth more than what some active NFL rookies' entire deals amounted to. The idea that a 5th-round pick could pull in that kind of money infuriated traditionalists. To them, it felt like arrogance, a cash grab before the grind. In their eyes, it was a slap across the league's face. But here's the reality. Shedeur is simply using the same tactics owners have used for decades. They exploit players for profit every single day. He's just reversing the playbook, ensuring he reaps the benefits this time. And that's the real reason the hate burns so intensely. Because deep down, people don't truly despise Shedeur. They hate that he beat the system at its own game. Then comes the arrogance label, straight out of the NFL strategy guide. Before the draft, anonymous scouts whispered that Shedeur was too cocky and hard to coach. Some even claimed his combine interviews rubbed executives the wrong way. But here's the catch. Those same executives have applauded white quarterbacks with the exact same traits. When Joe Burrow shows swagger, it's leadership. When Shedeur does it, suddenly it's arrogance. Interview 1208. 12:26. And let's not overlook the multiplier effect of his father's shadow. Shedeur Sanders isn't just a dad. He's a Hall of Famer, a cultural icon, and one of the most unapologetic voices in sports. A man who has never hesitated to call out hypocrisy, whether in the NFL, NCAA, or the media itself. Owners hate being called out. They hate a father demanding a say in his son's career. And so, Shedeur becomes collateral damage for his father's reputation. The harshest truth of all, many fans want Shedeur to fail. Why? Because it validates their worldview. If he succeeds, it proves the NFL's grip can be broken, that legacy and independence can win. But if he crashes, it proves the doubters right, that the system is unbeatable. Interview 1256, 1307. Even Stephen A. alluded to this on First Take. That's a story fans hold on to. Until Shedeur proved them wrong, they'll seize on every misstep to fuel the hate. So why all this hostility? It's not just one thing, it's all of it. He's Deion's son. He refused to play by the rules. He secured money before racking up NFL success. He carries himself with confidence. He dares to challenge the league's authority. That mix makes him a lightning rod. And while most young quarterbacks are allowed years to develop, Shedeur Sanders is being scrutinized in real time by millions, waiting for him to stumble. But here's the twist. Hate isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's fuel. And if Shedeur can channel that energy into drive, he just might flip the entire script on everyone hoping to see him fall. Because history proves one thing. The more the hate piles up, the sweeter the victory becomes when you finally prove them wrong. If there's any lesson from this saga, it's that Stephen A. Smith has never been afraid to say what others are too cautious to admit. That IG Live showdown with Shedeur Sanders was an exception. It was just the latest chapter in a career built on confrontation, accountability, and blasting people when the rest of the sports world stays silent. For decades, Stephen A. has gone after athletes, owners, coaches, and executives for their failings. Sometimes making enemies, but always making headlines. Take Tom Brady, hailed by many as the greatest of all time. But Stephen A. Smith isn't buying into mythology. He has consistently challenged Brady's legacy, arguing that his success leaned heavily on the Patriots' elite defenses and Bill Belichick's coaching genius. In a 2020 ESPN interview, Stephen A. declared, "Tom Brady's not the greatest quarterback of all time. I think he's been blessed with the circumstances that he's played in." His critique stemmed from belief that the Patriots' dynasty was fueled by far more than Brady's quarterback play, crediting consistent defensive dominance and Belichick's brilliance as equal drivers of the team's run. While many analysts and fans disagreed, Stephen A.'s stance sparked heated debates nationwide. But his issues with Brady go beyond football. He has openly mocked Brady's TB12 lifestyle, calling overhyped and unrealistic. In a 2017 episode of First Take, Stephen A. scoffed, "Tom Brady's got to be kidding me with this TB12 stuff. He's not invincible. He's not a superhero." His criticism of TB12 comes from skepticism about his nutritional and fitness claims, which many experts have also questioned. Stephen A. has repeatedly argued that Brady's longevity comes from his raw skill, talent, and drive, not some miracle diet. In a 2020 interview, he stated, "I don't think Tom Brady's TB12 lifestyle is why he's still playing at a high level. He's still got the skills, still got the talent, and still got the hunger to succeed." And Brady isn't the only icon to feel the sting of Stephen A.'s critiques. Aaron Rodgers, a two-time NFL MVP and Super Bowl champion with the Green Bay Packers, has also been in his crosshairs. In a 2019 episode of First Take, Stephen A. remarked, "Aaron Rodgers is not the leader that Tom Brady is. He's not the guy who can take over a game like Tom Brady can." His criticism of Rodgers has centered on leadership, questioning his ability to rally teammates and perform consistently in high-pressure moments, around a perceived lack of leadership and inability to lift his team in defining moments. While Rodgers has unquestionably displayed elite quarterbacking skills, Stephen A. maintains his leadership approach and in-game decision-making remain areas of concern. But the bigger question is this: does Stephen A. truly believe Rodgers isn't built for the spotlight, or is he simply stirring the pot for debate? Whatever the motivation, his takes have ignited endless arguments among NFL fans. Then there's Odell Beckham Jr., the dynamic wide receiver who has suited up for multiple franchises, including the New York Giants and Cleveland Browns. Yet Stephen A. has never shied away from criticizing OBJ's dedication. In a 2019 ESPN interview, Stephen A. bluntly said, "Odell Beckham Jr. is a guy who's got a lot of talent, but he's got to prove himself to me as a worker." His criticism stemmed from perception that OBJ hasn't consistently demonstrated a relentless work ethic or commitment to sharpen his craft. Sure, he's had dazzling moments on the field, but in Stephen A.'s eyes, those flashes aren't enough. He needs to grind harder to reach his ceiling. And let's be real, OBJ's off-field life hasn't done him many favors. His high-profile relationships and extravagant lifestyle have kept him under constant scrutiny. Stephen A.'s remarks are just the latest volley in the long-running debate over whether OBJ prioritizes football the way he should. When it comes to Colin Kaepernick's protest, Stephen A.'s stance has always been firm. He believes athletes should show respect for flag and national anthem. While many back him on this, others argue that Kaepernick's actions were a valid, peaceful stand against racial injustice. The controversy surrounding Kaepernick split the sports world, with players, analysts, and fans all weighing in. And Stephen A.'s opinions landed right in the middle of the storm. Praised by some for his candor, condemned by others for being dismissive of the issues Kaepernick was fighting to highlight. Then there's Cam Newton, the gifted quarterback who once led the Carolina Panthers to multiple playoff runs. Yet even he hasn't escaped Stephen A.'s critique. In a 2016 episode of First Take, Stephen A. stated, "Cam Newton is a guy who's got a lot of talent, but he's got to prove himself to me as a leader." His criticism centered on Newton's perceived shortcomings in leadership and his struggles to raise his team's performance when it mattered most. And while Newton has proven himself as one of the most athletic and versatile quarterbacks of his era, Stephen A. insists his leadership and on-field decisions still leave questions. And let's not forget Antonio Brown, the electric wide receiver who has worn the jerseys of teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers and Oakland Raiders. Still, Stephen A. has never stopped questioning Antonio Brown's focus on his teams, often blasting his off-field distractions. In a 2019 episode of First Take, Stephen A. said, "Antonio Brown is a guy who's got a lot of talent, but he's got a lot of drama." His criticism stems from belief that AB's personal chaos has overshadowed his football brilliance. From feuding with Ben Roethlisberger to his messy exit from the Steelers, AB's off-field life has remained under a microscope. Stephen A. argues that AB should lock in on football and cut the theatrics. Then there's Josh Allen, the young quarterback who's led the Buffalo Bills to multiple playoff runs. Yet in a 2020 episode of First Take, Stephen A. remarked, "Josh Allen's got a lot of talent, but he's got to prove himself to me as a consistent quarterback." His critique centers on perceived inconsistency. While Allen has delivered moments of brilliance, Stephen A. insists he must show steadier play and stronger leadership if he wants to be considered elite. Dak Prescott hasn't been spared either. The Dallas Cowboys quarterback, despite guiding his team to postseason appearances, has faced Stephen A.'s sharp takes about both leadership and money. In a 2020 episode of First Take, Stephen A. declared, "Dak Prescott's got to prove himself to me as a leader. He's got to show me that he's worth the money." His view is that Prescott's contract negotiations were mishandled, and until Dak consistently leads on the field, his pay demands will remain questionable.